Hello and welcome to Event Perspectives. Another week with another episode I'm really excited about. We'll be joined by Hannah Elston from Event Leaders Exchange, or ELX. And I know, Hannah, before we talked about this, I won't have you speak for an entire generation. Our youngest guest to date, I think, officially our first Gen Z guest. So we'll probably hit on some of those topics. But before we do anything else, how are you feeling about this podcast?
Feeling good. Thank you for having me, Rodney. And like I said, I won't speak for an entire generation, but I am more than happy to share the things that people have been telling me and that I've heard from some of my peers as well in the industry. So it's an honor to be your first Gen Z guest. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us. I know, it's funny because I remember too when I was joining. I was kind of the millennial, kind of in that like sweet spot where I was like, I can't speak for an entire generation back. It's been a while. I know in our pre-calls we were hitting on some of these, but I think it's always interesting to kind of reflect on just some of the thoughts and those experiences. But before we do any of that, I know you don't need a warm up. You're a podcaster in your own right, but I like to start off every episode with just an icebreaker question to get the conversation going. And I think for you today, the one that I want to ask you about is, what's something that you're obsessed with right now? It does not have to be work related.
Okay. It is not entirely work related. I love this question. As you know, I am going to be relocating to Spain next year, which I'm really excited about. So what I'm obsessed with right now is Duolingo as an app.
Okay.
I've loved Duolingo for ages. I think their B2C marketing is so good. Like, I love their team. But as an app, I'm obsessed. I'm spending about an hour a day on it right now. I can't say that my Spanish is very good because I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks. But I was actually thinking about it as well. Wouldn't it be amazing? And I'm being deadly serious here. If Duolingo also had a language for corporate jargon, and every new professional that came into corporate had to complete the course. So they would have to translate, like, what does boil the ocean mean? What is low-hanging fruit? Wouldn't that just make everyone's lives easier?
Hannah, I love this idea. I have to tell you, the very first corporate job I ever took, and this is not a joke whatsoever, and this will start to date me a little bit, is I walked into it and I had a massive monitor. I won't even describe what the setup was, but it was just an old style computer. And on my desk that they gave me at this internship was a binder full of acronyms for that specific company. It was Procter and Gamble. So it was, massive marketing company. And it was like, as part of your warm up, like, just go through hundreds of pages of acronym. And we're talking like, it was like a dictionary type page, like 50 per page. And I remember thinking, do I really need to know all? But so I love this idea. I just wonder, like, how specific does it have to be? Is it marketing is it marketing and IT, or is it company specific? But I love this idea. I think maybe that's the next venture. I think we should start this.
I think we should too. Maybe we should pitch it to Duolingo. If they're listening, hit me up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they are. I think they're listening. And one question that I'll have, because I know I've had many friends on Duolingo, the streaks. You said an hour a day. So I guess, is that like, is there length of lessons? And then I also know about the streaks. So what streak, what day in a row are you right now?
I am day 17. Okay. And the little bird emoji is kind of squatting over something. It's not entirely appropriate. But yeah, I'm on day 17. I only have to do 15 minutes a day. The lesson length varies from 5 minutes, but my longest conversation in Spanish I've had is 8 minutes, which I was very proud with. So
that's if you want to practice, we could do this a little bit in Spanish. I grew up speaking some Spanish, so we could try that at the end. Ooh. Maybe. But
regretting admitting this is my obsession now. Or because I'm talking about relocating, a lot of the stuff that it's teaching me is about buildings, what's in your neighborhood, how many floors does your apartment have? So not necessarily the content you're looking for on this podcast.
But I mean, probably a lot more, a lot more valuable to what you're going to be moving into. So, very exciting. And I think now I want to transition a little bit into just your entry point into events. I think almost all of these episodes when we're talking about people and how did you wind up here, myself included, it's never a super straightforward, well, I went to school seeking to be in events and then I ended up there. I feel like I have not heard that answer yet. I don't think I'm gonna hear it here, but tell us a little bit about kind of your work experience and what kind of initially brought you to events.
Yeah, of course. So I've been working in events for 5 years now, which seems crazy to me because I think of myself as pretty young, at least. Like you just said, I was the youngest on the podcast, but that's still 20% of my life I've been working for the events industry, which does feel like a significant amount of time to me.
Yeah.
I fell into the industry, as everyone likes to say, because of the pandemic. So before the pandemic, I was in college and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I do think that is still a crazy thing that we expect 18-year-olds to know exactly what it is they're going to do for the rest of their lives and run with that. So I decided not to go into education and just get the first full-time job that I could get, which is more and more common, I think, these days. Is just trying to make a living and make a life. And eventually, after a series of bar jobs and other things, I wound up as a makeup artist for Estee Lauder at Gatwick Airport, um, which is really random. But I thought that was my dream. It was very early starts working in an airport. I would be up at like 3 a.m. And then getting people glammed up before their flights. And then the pandemic happened, and I had no idea what I was going to do because all the airports were closed. And because I was fairly new to the role, I was made redundant pretty quickly. So thankfully, at that time, my partner's mum, she had just started a medical communications agency and they were looking for someone to do some admin work for them. So my start in events was for the pharmaceutical industry. And it was really just doing registration reports and sort of basic admin work to begin with. And then I worked there for like a few years and I kind of realized that, I wanted to be more involved in the events specifically. So we started focusing more on logistics and planning and speaker coordination. And I liked it. I liked it a lot, but my heart kind of fell with the marketing side of things. So when things were evolving a little bit more and the events were getting a bit bigger and a bit more intense, I also started to do some community events for a
Mhm,
community of general practitioners. And that kind of gave me the insight and the knowledge that I needed to do other community events.
mhm.
And eventually, ELX came up as an opportunity. And, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but you read a job description, you think this was written for me, like this was
Yeah,
built for me.
yeah.
I read that job description and I was like, I have to get this job. I've never felt that way about anything else, but I was like, I have to get this job. I have to give it everything I've got. I don't think I've ever stressed so much over a presentation for a role. But I did eventually get it. And now I've been with the ELX for 3 years. In fact, yeah, it is my 3-year anniversary on Friday. So in 2 days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there we go.
Wow. Well, early congratulations, on that. I know we'll talk a little bit about kinda your role. I know you're now the senior manager of partnerships, marketing, and communications at ELX. So I think, in those years, I think it sounds like you've probably already landed and kind of continue to grow that area of responsibility, which I think says probably a lot about you. So I want to, I want to hit on some of these things that led you there, if that's okay. Um, just what was that experience? So as you were kind of coming into more of whether you want to call it a corporate work environment or kind of more of a maybe that jargon, that work life, that first marketing role, like what was that like? Was it things that you were kind of discovering or learning for the first time, and how did you kinda continue to just plug away? Because I think you hit on a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing now is, initiative and, I think and just even some of the work that you and I have done together, I think I've kind of identify a lot of that. I'm going to solve that problem. But tell us a little bit about kind of how you grew that, area of
Yeah.
responsibility or just how you know, grew from that initial role into more corporate work.
Yeah, of course. Well, so starting in the medical industry, there's a lot of rules, a lot of rules, a lot of guardrails, a lot of things you want to do that you can't do. And I'm a creative person. So before I dropped out of college, actually, I studied art, I studied photography. I've always been a very creative person. And so I really wanted to get, I guess, more innovative with the way that we were marketing things. Now,
Mhm.
it's very hard to do that in medcoms.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
kind of constantly being told no. And I remember there were some times where I would, I guess, like design an invite or something like this. And they would say something which was make it more corporate. And
Yeah.
more corporate to me just translated to more boring.
Yeah.
And so I would just keep, trying to get things perfectly boring, is how I
Yeah.
described it, so that it would
Yeah.
meet all of these requirements and get through approval. And I think, you can have some fun with it to a degree, but I just had bigger and brighter ideas, right?
Yeah.
And so when I finally stepped out of that industry and into working for ELX as a community, I mean, nobody's really been doing it like ELX, right? We're so unique as a company. And so there was so much opportunity to create new brand identity and like new
Mhm.
projects and new ways of outreach. And just all of a sudden, those creative wheels like really got spinning for me. And I think having been told for so long, stick in this lane, stick in this box, and just do that, it gave me this kind of problem where I was like, what should I do? What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
But then also that joy of freedom, like, oh, you want me to suggest something. You want me to play on that innovative piece. So I feel
Right.
like it's actually worked out pretty well. I'm able to take, like, I guess, stakeholder suggestions quite well, mixed with my own ideas and deliver something which I feel is in line. So it's no longer boringly corporate, but it is to spec and also
Right.
fun and exciting.
Because there is something in there too, right? Like that I think I've learned, that as when you're younger and you see something and like, you said, it's just like, what's perfectly boring. And, then there is also, once you've been somewhere for a while, like that idea of like, defend the brand guidelines and like, so like I still have a push and pull, like in my own mind at times where,
Mhm.
somebody might have a wild idea and, my brain now, decades plus in, is like, "No," but you realize, like, having the ability of kinda separating out and really saying, "Well, why?" Like, I think brand and protecting a brand or having, brand guidelines is an important concept, but at the same time, that it's important to probably be aware of, like, are we not breaking through because we are perfectly boring and just like everybody else, right? Um eh, Tell tell us a little bit about, so you kinda described, ELX being this, like, perfect role for you. How did
Mhm.
it come across your way? And then, like, how did you prepare for it? Because I mean, obviously, at that point, you had some years of experience in the event, space, and I guess maybe tell the audience too a little bit about ELX and who that audience is, because I think that also makes it pretty interesting and probably fun role, as well in terms of who you're kinda building and communicating with as it relates to events. So, um how did that role come up? And tell us a little bit about, how you kinda prepared for it and what that looked like.
Sure. Um, Gosh, okay. Well, I I moved from my first agency medcoms role, and I decided that, like every young professional should do, I should work in central London, because working in a big city means success.
Mhm.
And so I took a role very similar there, and I would say I gave it about 2 months before I was like, I absolutely hate this. This is not for me. And I called up my partner on the phone one lunch break and I was basically just burst into tears. And I was like, I've ruined my
Mhm.
whole life. Why did I do this?
Yeah.
Um, and just by chance, and this is why I always say it's all about who you know, sat across from him was a lady renting a desk for a company. She worked for a company called Explory and she was their head of marketing. And she was their head of marketing and also had connections, obviously, with ELX, as Mark, who is the CEO of Explory, is also a co founder for ELX. And
Mhm.
so she overheard this conversation and just from like hanging around him knew that I was working in events or that I had like some sort of background in working for a community. And so she basically said, hey, like, I had this conversation. Firstly, is she okay? And secondly, would she be interested in this marketing role that we have for a new company called ELX? And then that was how that opportunity came around. I saw the email
Yeah.
and I was like, this is so perfect. Um, a bit of context then about ELX, and I guess especially its growth in the past 3 years. So when I joined the company, I believe there was almost 50 members of the community. We've now surpassed 300 members. So in my 3 years of being there, we're very, very pleased with that growth. We're an invitation-only community for senior global event leaders from some of the largest organizations in the world. So really, we gather people that have reached the top of their journeys. We have the saying, it's lonely at the top. And we bring them together to still talk about that growth, right? And
Mhm.
how the events industry is evolving. You know, your personal growth and your career growth doesn't have to stop just because you've become a VP. And there's still so much more to learn, especially with, how fast technology is evolving right now. You can guarantee there's a million and one things still to learn. So we bring them together in that space to talk about that, to talk about maybe challenges that they're having in their events function or organizations, and just really providing them a safe space. And so watching that flourish from less than 50 members to now over 300 and seeing that come to life in the room is just, it brings me so much joy. And working for a community, I think, plays in well to my role in communications. I think I'm forever going to be a communications event girl, just because I love hearing how things are going for other people and connecting with other people. And the bottom line is that's what we do. We connect. We connect people that share the same ideas or share the same lives in some way that maybe wouldn't have known each other before. We bring them together. So that's ELX and the magic of it and how I came to be part of it.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I think, you already said so many great things there. And I think, really in some ways, this podcast is really an attempt of also kind of establishing those connections and having, like, helping people come across conversations that feel familiar. I think
Yeah.
sometimes, I don't know if you experience this at all. I mean, we have the people who understand our roles, and then we have the people who go, like, I don't know, I don't get it all, what you
Yeah.
do or what you're doing or why you do it. I don't know why it seems like it gets stressful at points and then it's crazy. And then, like, it's a world, and never mind then being kind of at the top of an organization or, really large scale kind of large company. I know that there are kind of requirements for someone who wants to be a member at ELX and kind of what their role is, but also the size of the company. So I think you're really helping to bring, that audience together. Like, who better that knows your challenges and problems and how are they solving it? I think those communities can be so beneficial. Never mind when you're curating, that set of people. Bring them together. But I would imagine for you as well, as you're setting up events, as you're setting up comms, it's probably a group of people who know a thing or two about, like, why'd you say it this way? Why are you doing it that way?
Yes.
I know a little bit about building events for event people. Anything you want to share? Just like what is that experience like for you? Building and doing events for some of the best in the world. What does that feel like?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love this question. So, firstly, to start with what you were saying earlier about people not really understanding what you do, try explaining to your friends that you make events for event people that run events for big organizations. I feel like my granddad looked at me with the blankest face ever when I first tried to explain what I do. In fact, I'm not even sure my partner's fully convinced. Anyway, um, I love this question because I feel like everyone assumes that you'd be feeling the pressure, right? It's a little bit daunting to put on a show for people that have done this for so many years for such large organizations with massive budgets and do it really, really well. Like I said earlier, I've been in this industry for 5 years, which feels like a long time to me, but that's pocket change to some of them who have been doing this for decades of their life.
Yeah.
And so I think when I first joined in that first year, I was basically on high alert and nervous all the time. And we're all human, right? So a couple of times, maybe I made a couple mistakes in my emails or things like that. These things happen. AI wasn't being as used as much as it is now, so I didn't have it to proofread it for me. Um, and I think, I can't remember. It was about 5 email responses, and they were So lovely. And it was just members of our community being like, "Hi, Hannah, I just wanted to point out that this happened. No big deal, has happened to the best of us." And that's when I
Yeah,
realized, like, it may seem that they would be the most intimidating audience, but actually they're the most understanding. They've gone through every challenge, every mistake. I had to, for our North American summit that we did in February, I had to get up on the stage last minute notice, an hour till showtime and present. And the support that I had from them, they were like, "Hey, these things happen. We know how it goes. You handled the situation well." And so I think it also means, yes, they are a bit intimidated sometimes, but also they're very, very understanding. And finally, the feedback is so perfect. If you think about your feedback surveys that you get from your customers who, they don't run events, they just think that,
right.
I don't know, nothing goes behind a banquet, right? Like you're
Yeah,
just
right.
planning a party and like
Yeah,
get a grip. Whereas these people get it so well that their feedback on our events and our experiences is so well written and so incredibly valuable to us. So
yeah.
actually, I think it has far more perks than pressures, I would say.
Uh, I mean, it's a phenomenal answer, and I won't make it about me, but similar, like as I build, I think what you're saying is that feedback that comes through is often so constructive,
Yeah.
compared to like, generally speaking, I think having been in the events world and on, like designing events for non-event people, sometimes the feedback or the questions or the ideas are like, okay, well, it would be great, if we could pick you up in a rocket and, send you around to every event. Yeah, that would be fantastic if we could do that. But I think the feedback that often comes from this audience, there's so many good valuable elements, and sometimes it's like, you're right, that's obvious, we should do that, or can have great conversations with this audience too, about, oh, well, what about I found myself in those conversations with people attending our events that it's like, I just want to. Can we put time on the count? I'd love to just chat about this. Like, how would you
Yeah.
handle this versus that? It's kind of like, I'm your attendee. I'm not your consultant, but but at the same time, I think it is. It's a it's it's a challenge, but at the same time, I think there is so much joy in kind of bringing these people together, and also giving them an attendee experience, where they're so often on the flip side of that. I think it can be a lot of fun to see them on the attendee side of things.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk a little bit. I want to shift this conversation a little bit into kind of what is some of the more interesting challenges that you're working on now. I think you've been in this role for a number of years. I know there are a couple of components, and you hit on a keyword that I think these days we cannot not talk about, which was AI.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious, just as you're thinking about your role, challenges, things that you're working on now, tell us a little bit about what your focus is, and maybe I'll
Yeah.
start by saying, let's talk a little bit about AI and how that's kind of working its way into your approach, what you're doing, how you're feeling about it, coming into kind of the work that you do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love AI. Okay. There's no there's no question about that. I do think it has so many benefits to it. And it is used to make everything more efficient, right? So I get that. And I can't imagine doing my job now the way that I do without using the support of AI. Okay. So that is
Mhm.
my big disclaimer.
Yeah,
I too it's not that I'm tired of talking about it,
yeah,
but I'm overwhelmed by just how much is coming in about AI at the moment. There is
right,
a new platform or a new update or a new capability every 10 seconds. And it is a little bit like, oh my gosh, how do I make sure that how I'm using AI is still the most current and the most efficient way of doing things? I think the challenge that I'm having right now is trying to translate that to my own team. And one of the things that I think I touched on with you as well is that how do I make my team still feel like, they are so efficient within themselves and that the work they're doing is great when at the same time I'm saying to them, can you train a robot to do what you do for me,
right,
please? And
right.
then that frees up a whole new bunch of time that we have to think of and we will think of something for them to do with that time,
Yeah.
but it's just
Right.
changing that. And how do you navigate that as a leader? Because that is what I would say is my ultimate biggest challenge right now, is that I've been executing for events for the past 4.5 years and very recently have come into a leadership role. So how do I make my team feel valued and that they are efficient enough and doing a good enough job, while also telling them that they should be using AI to do those things for them?
Right. And let's hit on that because I think that's really well said. And, I'm even looking at a lot of like, here at Rain Focus, we're very much embracing AI tools and how are we incorporating these, not to automate things that we're spending time doing and instead freeing us up to do something else. So I know in our kind of pre-conversation, we both, I think, shared an idea of freeing up time from some of these tasks, I think does enable or potentially unlock new things that we can be solving. But I'm curious to just get your take on that. Because obviously in this idea of like, if I automate these things, now what do I do? So if someone's coming to you in kind of your new leader role, like how are you kind of approaching that question? If someone's saying, you want me to automate my job, but I want my job. So
Yeah.
how would you kind of approach that conversation?
Yeah, of course. And I've had to approach that conversation a few times, right? And I think the best thing I can say is that AI is your strategic advisor. Ask it, what have we not considered that we could be doing that would make, I don't my role easier, or the member experience better, or improvements to our website, or is there anything our brand is missing? Having it identify these holes that we can then build a project from and then fix. I think something good about AI is that it's always going to say something could be better or finely tuned. Maybe that's just mine, but I swear it's always giving me suggestions on how I could
Yeah.
be better. Thank you, AI. No one asked.
Yeah.
But in this instance, it is actually really, really helpful. So I would say to them, use it as your strategic advisor. We actually have our own GPTs. So
Mm.
we have our CEO as a GPT, Nicola GPT. So a lot of the time I will ask her first before I ask actual Nicola. So we're
Yeah.
protecting each other's schedules. And then we also have our own assistants. And we also have a proofreader and a membership qualifier. So we've built a lot of GPTs to help us that we can go to for specific things. But I have what I call Hannah's executive, and Hannah's executive is my sort of strategic advisor. So I come up with ideas with her,
Yeah.
and then I'll
Yeah.
talk to Nicola GPT about that
Yeah.
until I have something that I feel is really tangible and has good ground. And then I can bring it to one of our monthly meetings or directly to Nicola, something like that. So I will say that to my team all the time. Like, if you have free time, have a conversation with AI. I guarantee we'll find something for you to do. But hey, we work in events. We're never short of stuff to do anyways, right? So I guess it's easy to say, whilst we're making this more efficient for them and we're streamlining things, AI still always needs a bit of human input. So as much as I am saying to them, use your free time wisely and do this, I also am not so naive that I don't recognize AI doesn't run fully on its own yet. There's a lot of workflow checking, automation, health checks, all of these things that they still have to focus on too. And then I would finally say as well, I don't like using AI for AI's sake, because
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
something that I'm seeing a lot of.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be careful about that too. When I say, right, in your free time, let's use it to find things to do. But at the same time, if it gives you a suggestion, which is like, I don't know, build a custom GPT because why not? That's not good
Mhm.
enough. It has to be
Right.
relevant. It has to feel, yeah, relevant, and that we're not just doing this because we're jumping on some sort of AI bandwagon, which I fear a lot of people are falling into this trap of just sounding like it's AI for AI's sake. So
Right.
that is what I would say.
I I think those are all phenomenal answers. I was gonna ask you to give me an example, and I think you did. As part of your answer, you must do a podcast or something. We'll plug that later. But the and I think that's so important. As I look at it, certainly I do understand. Like I think the caution or the concern around what does this mean for me, but at the same time, I think there is a an importance of learning to understand the tool, but also learning to understand how can it help your role. Because I think we talked about this, and I won't go into the exact details, but there was a role where we used to kind of bring interns that I was kind of managing, and we are always looking to make some of those, like the projects and things that they were working on, faster, better, more automated. How do we use the tools? How do we use our platforms? How are we doing this? And I remember at one point, kind of my boss, an ELX member, by the way, at the time, was like, but if we do this, like, are we concerned at all about them not having something else to do? And I said, no, because it's events. Like, we'll find, it was like, well, what will they do instead? And I think my answer was something better, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I do think as human beings and people work in events, I mean, I know I spent all day yesterday just, venue searching. And I mean, through the use of AI, like a lot of this became helpful, but, we're talking about, a quick last minute thing for, an event that's in a different country. And I'm like, I'm going through the process of needing to get this all done extremely quickly. And these tools are from facilitating what are the options? What are places that I should consider? This is a place I've never been before. What, proximity to this location. What are some other factors I can take a look at? Budget estimates. My ability to get to great options, present them, and then make a decision on them with just the types of factors that you really want to be considering is is tremendously better than what I could have done, with just the internet, and obviously if we kind of keep going back in time, there are probably, other ways that these tools have been scary that I think leaning in, understanding, but also not doing it for the sake of doing it, right? Because I
Yeah.
think, recognizing that it should be adding value to what you do and having a good understanding of what your job is. So I think, and I love that answer. I'm not going to let you get away without speaking for your generation. Let's talk some Gen Z things.
Okay.
I'm curious in your role and as you're looking at events and who you're planning for. Obviously, we've talked about your membership is probably a pretty senior leader group. So I know you kind of probably have a good understanding of who your audience is and how many years that they've had, and I'm sure it's a good number. But how are you thinking about content? And I know in some of our pre-conversations we talked about this idea of, are we doing things for that other generation, or are we actually doing things that, these are preferences that are getting maybe pulled forward, but really they meet the needs of everyone. So, it could be a common thing like session lengths and formats, but I'm curious just from your thought process, coming into the events world, what do you see that maybe to us is like, oh, this is how we've always done it, and it's not broken, don't fix it. But maybe from your perspective, you say, why are we doing those things this way?
Love that question. Yeah, of course. I mean, very early on when I started working at ELX and Nicola joined us, one of the first things she told me was that we've always done it this way is the most dangerous sentence in the events industry. And I believe she was absolutely right. So when I have a look at some of the ways that we're doing things now, and there is an underlying tone of we've always done it this way.
Mhm.
The real question is do we like this? Is this
Yeah.
enjoyable? Is this still entertaining? Or is
Mhm.
this something that we see as a drag? Because quite often there are a lot of things that I'm noticing that people are complaining about and they're not doing anything to change because that's the way
Mhm.
it is. So one of the examples I will say is a classic panel format. Everyone has
Mhm.
seen a panel. We know how they work. They're the same every time. You sit down and then you're on your phone half the time as well because you're either taking notes or you saw an email that came up that was more relevant, and it doesn't matter because you're getting the AI summary at the end of the session anyway.
Mhm.
And instantly you're kind of just there for the sake of being there and not
Right.
actually absorbing what's being given to you. Something that I have decided to do, I have a session at IMEX Frankfurt next week, and we've decided instead of labeling this as a panel, we're labeling it as more of a live show, if you will.
Mhm.
And I've said
Mm.
that this is not going to be an interview, this is a conversation.
Mhm.
And so instead of the host kind of just throwing questions at the people that are on the panel, it's an actual conversation about a topic, and we're having it being led by the audience. So it's a fully interactive session. So we start with learning more about the audience, throwing out a couple of polls, a couple of word clouds, finding out who it is that we're speaking to in the room first. Because a lot of the time with a panel, you just assume who's going to be there, right? Who's at the show and
Right.
who's going to sit there and then do your content that way. But we're starting it by finding out who our audience is first. Then we're going to move into selected topics. So what do you want us to talk about? The synopsis is not just, this is exactly what we're talking about. It's, we can cover a variety of things. What do you, as an audience sat in this room, want to hear first? And
Mhm.
then we move from there. Do you want us to dive into that? Or do you want us to move on to the second most popular topic? Or do you want to open up for a Q&A? And on Q&A, one of the things that I have noticed, and especially, again, within people maybe my age, is that going through the pandemic and a lot of other things we went through at a sort of more developmental time in our lives, is that we don't always love to raise a hand or draw a
Mhm.
lot of attention to ourselves. Sometimes we don't want to seem stupid when we're asking a question, which actually I think is a
Mhm.
problem that loads of people have faced over many
Yeah.
generations, many years.
Right.
And now we have a function that allows us to ask questions without having to actually stand up in the room or have a microphone in our hand. But people aren't using it. Not really, not as
Mhm.
much as I would like to see. So we're
Right.
also having just a QR code. So you can raise your hand if you would like. If you do not like, you could also just submit your question. It will appear on the screen behind us and we can talk about it. So
Mhm.
it's finding, I guess, a new way of doing something that has been done before, but making it more tailored and more personalized to the experience of someone sat in the audience instead of it just being, I'm going to interview these three people about their lives and you maybe or may not take notes and then you'll get a summary at the end of it. So that's just one key example that I
Yeah.
wanted to share, because
Yeah.
it does bring in technology as well into how we're trying to innovate that. And I think there was another example I gave you, Rodney, about award ceremonies.
Mhm.
I think we need to do something to make award ceremonies more fun for the people that aren't winning. I
Mhm.
still
Yeah.
don't know
Fun.
exactly
Yeah.
what the answer is to that.
Yeah.
I think we've pulled the open bar and the free booze card long enough. I think we need to do something else that makes it more fun to everyone else that just sits and claps for 2 hours.
Right.
Um, so that will be my next working piece.
Uh, you know what? So I love so much about what you just covered, and so much I think is understand. I think what you've hit on is you don't have to know the answer. One, to know that there's a problem, right? And like I think that can be important, right? Like I think award ceremonies. I don't disagree with you, and I feel like I've felt this way from early days. And
Mhm.
I mean that's like maybe in a role where you're just watching it come together and you go, okay, well, maybe it's fun for them. And now I've been, a participant. I've been a winner. I've been participant, in different roles of award ceremony. And you still kind of go like, okay, like, are we doing, is this fun? And sometimes it's even framing can be so helpful. Like
Mhm.
just you calling a panel a live show, like and borrowing from formats that people might go like, oh, a live show. Like, now I know what you might be expecting of me. I'm coming a little bit more ready into this and with some expectations, so I think there's always a need to meet those expectations. Um, but I think it can be subtle changes to existing formats that work, right? Like, I think that there is value to a panel. From my perspective, running events, like, it's a lower lift potentially for, great participants that you might have, and that has some value. But then
Mhm.
I think what can be so, what can be a letdown is someone who goes like, that is the person I want to hear from, but the moderator is not asking the questions. Like
Yeah.
it would be great. Like, this is like, theoretically, it's my group of people that I want to hear from, but no one's asking the right questions, and I just have to sit here and go like, maybe I'll get a chance to ask them afterwards. Maybe there will be a long line and I've got to move to my next session. So, um, I think subtle changes in even framing can really help achieve or hit those pieces, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that that is one of the biggest problems with panels is that we can't control what the moderator or host is going to ask as much as we wish that we could. And therefore, by making it more interactive, that's sort of my goal is that hopefully everyone will leave feeling like we spoke about what they wanted us to speak about and that they had those
Mhm.
questions answered. But, like you were saying, sometimes there is a purpose and a place for a panel to be done in that way. And that's fine. But it's also about
Mhm.
keeping your audience engaged. And some
Right.
people, even if you want to hear from them, hate to say it, not everyone is a natural born engaging speaker,
Right.
which you might
Yeah.
have witnessed on some panels
Yeah.
before. So some people need more guidance than others.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just about, I guess, tailoring to all of those things in a way that makes it something you actually want to sit and watch. Because honestly, like, even watching a Netflix show, I get out my phone maybe halfway through and get distracted and start working on something else. I think that's more and more
Right.
common these days to actually have someone's undivided attention, even if what's on the stage is pretty valuable, is a very hard thing to be able to keep
Yeah.
a hold of. And, not speaking for my whole generation, but I think some of us, we put our hands up and say that maybe we do fall into a category of not having the best attention spans in the world, which is
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's just about, I guess, catering to a newer audience in that sense as well, that do need to be almost forcefully more engaged, making those
Yeah.
sessions interactive so that that they are listening and that they have their eyes on you. Um, so yeah, that's one more thing I would add to that.
And that I think is so important to note that though that maybe is a characterization of a generation. I think I see myself in my work life every day that I'm like I'll bounce between 17 things and do 1% of 17 tasks in an hour and realize like you got to do one, focus.
Mhm.
And so I think though it might, be, oh, well, this is the new generation that we need to plant. I think that really it's part of the reality of the world. And maybe that is just the world, that Gen Z has pretty much always known. The reality is those ramifications exist across the board. We all have these devices that are pulling our attention span. And, it's not just like, well, if you don't have Gen Z in the room, you don't need to be engaging because, everyone else can focus. So I would say no, I think it's behavior that, does bleed across. And,
Oh,
that 90-minute format doesn't work great for most of us anymore.
yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I mean, there may not be so many people statistically in the older generation that's scrolling through TikTok for 2 hours a day, but ask them the
Mhm.
same question about Facebook Reels or Facebook
Right.
videos, then you're
Yeah,
probably going to get
exactly.
a similar answer, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we are just
Yeah.
all so prone to being involved in our phones and getting new, interesting content that we haven't seen before from all different creators all over the world. Like, at a stupid pace.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it's the competition is difficult to try and grasp anyone's attention, which is why we're seeing more people doing such outrageous things on social media that we don't agree with just to get
Right.
attention for 2 minutes.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's affecting, like you say, everyone, and I think because we've grown up in it, maybe that's why there is that characterization that naturally falls to our generation, but I
Mhm.
certainly see it, especially in some of my family members, that they won't mind me saying that,
Yeah.
we all fall to it sometimes.
Yeah. Uh, Absolutely. And I could keep having this conversation, but I'm going to transition us into the next topic. But I think these were, such great answers. Keep solving those problems. Let me know as you have any answers if you figure out that awards dinner as well, because I've got one that I'm going to be thinking about pretty soon. So, um, one question that I like to ask all guests when they join the show is the event industry, as we've talked about, is kind of a crazy place. Can be stressful, can have its ups and downs and crazy things thrown at you. I'd love to know in the years that you've been in events, what's your favorite piece of advice? Whether it's one that you like to give, or maybe it's advice that you've been given as it relates to fellow aspiring event professionals.
I love that. Okay, my piece of advice. Oh. there's so much advice to give that I've learned from some of my mentors over the years. But I think something that I would tell everyone is know when it is time to focus on the development of your life and who you are, as opposed to the development of your career. I think
Mm,
it's too easy because we spend so much of our lives working that when we're looking for progression, we naturally think, oh, that needs to be career progression. But actually, it's so healthy to just stop and think, is that really what I want? Or am I seeking a bigger change? What does success look like to me as a person? Your career doesn't define your whole life. And it's really easy for that line to get blurred, especially when you're younger and you think, I need to lay the groundwork for the rest of my life. I need to, be on it at all times. I need to make sure that I reach this title by this age so that when I'm 50, I can, achieve all these great things that I want to achieve. But actually, sometimes you need to know when to, yes, prioritize that, but also prioritize yourself. Maybe it's a new skill that you want to learn, or a new
mm,
hobby you want to take on, or a country you want to move to. Instead of
mm,
thinking that that validation of success and that progression can only come from your career, you have to know when to switch that and just focus on you. And the main bottom line of all of this is just look after yourself. There is so much more to life. Don't let the little things that happen at work weigh you down long term, because it all works out okay at the end of the day. And in events, we're not saving lives. It's a really
mm.
stressful job. It's in the top 3 most stressful jobs ever, I think, or something like that. Chloe always tells me. Um, so it is stressful, but hey, like, life goes on. There's tomorrow. Events get delayed. Marketing comms don't always go to plan. It's fine.
Mhm,
Look
mhm.
after yourself. Think about your own growth. And that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Hannah, that's wise advice. One of my favorite ones that I've heard so far. And
Oh.
when I think about it, when I think of some of the people who've had the biggest impact on me, even personally and professionally, it's a lot of people who are great people, right? Who have kind of figured out their own lives, and you know they have reached a certain level of achievement, but so much about them. And what I think I've gleaned from them is how, like, the people that they are is really the gravitational pull. So I think I absolutely love that answer of keeping yourself and making sure you're not pursuing things that are maybe for a life that you think you're supposed to have, but they're not fulfilling you personally. Because I think at the end of the day, you're not going to be a person who is all that great to work with, most likely, if you're pursuing and doing a whole bunch of things that are not really what you want deep down. I think that it's super
Mhm.
important to be thinking about those things. So, I think the
Absolutely.
event industry is very happy that, after the COVID happened and you were at the Gatwick Airport, that you pursued down this path. I think we're excited to have you here, and
Oh, thank you.
look forward to seeing what you continue to do at ELX. Last question.
Okay.
I've got like last. I've said, if you're on board, I want to do a lightning round. So all of the hard content is done. This is just going to be rapid fire questions, and the hardest part for me is I'm not supposed to respond. We're supposed to just put these together, and you answer first answer that comes to mind. If you're ready, I'm going to start firing away.
Okay. So you want quick, speedy answers from me.
First, top of mind answer.
Okay. Let's go.
Here we go. TikTok or LinkedIn?
TikTok.
True or false? You prefer small, intimate events over large scale ones?
False.
The best airline is?
British Airways.
Fair. Window seat or aisle seat?
I'll see.
Good answer. RSVP early or last minute?
Last minute.
Yeah, of course.
I'll complain
You
about
have a
people doing it, but
wait, I don't know yet. You have a concert to close your event. Who's your dream musical artist?
Billie Eilish.
Oh, what is your go-to comfort food during event planning stress?
Pizza. And just in life.
Mm,
Pizza.
mm. What is your current favorite mobile app?
Duolingo.
Great answer. Well, we're gonna get them to sponsor this. I don't know if you have a contact or not. I'm gonna get them to sponsor this episode. Hannah, thank you so much. This was so much fun. For anyone who's listening, wants to participate, there is a link to join if you would like to be interviewed on this podcast as well. Hannah, thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. This was really fun.
All right.
Take care.